Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got the Cryptogaucho here, and we are going to go a deep dive into all things AI and all things crypto and all things Argentina and maybe all things the United States. Welcome to the show. How's your day going?
Good. I'm in Mendoza right now. Beautiful, beautiful weather, as you can see. I'm actually taking a look at these two teto birds, which are birds from here, from Argentina. That they just had two little babies.
Nice.
Very protective of them. So if I go into the backyards, they're like screeching. But yeah. Lovely to be in the podcast with you. We've had some conversation. I think you're one of the coolest persons that are in Argentina at the moment, and I really appreciate the sort of understanding and interviewing people for what is a very cool thing that's happening here.
And it's crazy. It's so crazy what's going on in Argentina right now. The big news of last week, OpenAI is now doing a deal with Sur Energy, which I just looked up what Sur Energy was, and it's some sort of capital vehicle related to Argentina, related to Satellogico. How do you pronounce Satellogico?
Satellogic.
Satellogic.
We can do that. So yeah, I think it's I think it's very interesting what's happening in terms of space, and I know that this is not necessarily the point of the conversation that we're having, but I also have a very good friend, Marco Bruno, that I would love for you to interview. So Marco Bruno is a guy from Mendoza as well, and his dream has always been to be an astronaut, right? And he's done many things. Like he crossed the Atlantic in a submarine, to train for... it's just like one of those people that has a weird dream that they really want to happen. And now, so there's this space company called Axiom, and they've selected one of the problems that I have is I'm very honest in conversations. I'm really bad at like signing NDAs. So
Me too.
I don't know. I'm just gonna tell you everything that I know. But there's like the main person that is going to potentially be an astronaut is a woman from Argentina. I can't remember her name, but she's awesome. And he's a potential substitute for that to happen.
Wow. So Argentina has a space program.
Argentina has a space program. There's a lot of people that is interested in doing spaceport in Argentina because the launching of different stationary orbits, and I think we're about to see. I don't know. I'm just so excited. There's so many combinations of like AI, people wanting to do spaceports, and like Argentina being sort of the ground for all of this to happen. I'm trying to, during DevConnect, I'm trying to do an event for space-related stuff. You also have people that are playing with the idea of extending the Argentinian jurisdiction, and there's a lot of stuff that we're going to get into in the future, like during the conversation.
Jurisdiction up or around?
Up.
Up. Okay. Oh man.
So if you launch a satellite up, that is sort of protected by this jurisdiction that you're creating, then you can sort of become like a proxy, a VPN for global communications based on whatever your jurisdiction says. So you can be the Cayman Islands of data, basically.
Whoa. So do you know how it works already? I've done a few podcasts many years ago, or actually I had a crazy conversation in a hot tub in Nevada City, California, with a helicopter guy who I had just gotten out of a podcast. I can't even remember who I interviewed. And we're in this hot tub at this gym, basically, and I didn't know him or anything like that. And he starts explaining the alpha, beta, all these different things of the different levels of space. Yeah. But not only space, because it's also helicopters, and this gets into drones and everything like that. Yeah. Do you know at what point does it turn from like national jurisdiction into space? Do you know?
Well, I think like actually, I don't know. I've been trying to research this stuff because different nations have different ways of going about, like what the property. If you have a piece of land, like your property on top of that is very different to what happens when from the U.S. and from different countries.
Interesting.
So you can sort of be the owner and have a private token that represents the airwaves that are passing through whatever land you have. So every country manages differently. Um, but Argentina tends to be one of those countries where if you find a meteor, it belongs to the government. Um,
Whoa.
yeah. So I think we're really tipping the toes into a weird new kind of regulation for something that people never thought about before. Um, but we're very well positioned by everything that's happening to be one of the leading countries in terms of regulation for opening up the skies and the space. And
Whoa. Okay, so this is reminding me of a podcast I did with a drone founder in Ireland, who's one of the kind of leading edges on drones, and he's battling Google, and he keyed me into what's going on in the United States in terms of airspace. So the US has crazy airspace regulations because we've had the decentralized people who just own their own airplanes, and so it's been all mapped out for like 100 years in the
yeah,
United States. That's different from Europe, and it's different from Argentina. He couldn't answer any of the questions I had about Argentina, but now as you said that, I've just looked it up. So we've got Argentina's airspace is closer to something called ECAO.
mhm,
So there's overflight entry permits required. If you want to enter Argentina airspace, you need to request an overflight clearance at least 48 hours in advance. They use controlled versus uncontrolled distinctions. There's permit-driven access, tailoring to less dense traffic. But it's not the question. Because the question I have is like, at what point does it become space? And
space.
what time, yeah, like where does that, how does that work?
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. There's like so many discussions happening right now. With like, you also can see like the Antarctic and everything in sense that people are
yeah,
trying to understand what the claims of territory that they didn't think that potentially they were so useful before, and now they're
yeah.
starting to become useful.
Wow.
And like I've seen in the US, there's a lot of regulation for I don't know if you build a building next to a house and you're preventing them from having sunlight, then that's something that you can
Go to
argue
court
against in
over.
a court law.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that regulation doesn't really exist in Argentina.
yeah.
Um, I had a friend of mine, I have a friend of mine, really good friend from the UK, that she had to, so in order to be protected by the law in the UK, her neighbor wanted to build this super skyscraper thing, but the only way that she could have been protected is that if she had like five working spaces in the house, meaning that it was like bedrooms or like entertainment centers. And she ended up putting a TV in an empty room just because that would classify it as an entertainment area. And that would mean that she was prevented from the neighbor building this big building that would have cut off the sunlight. So basically, is to say that bureaucracy and all the regulations are sort of trying to catch up, but in a very slow way.
So yeah, this is a very important point because I gave a talk last week at USEMA University here in Argentina, and I titled the talk "The Rebirth of the Renaissance."
Mhm.
And why I think Buenos Aires and Argentina, and I would love to go to Mendoza because I don't think it'll work like it did in the
Yeah.
Renaissance, but I believe that Buenos Aires so far, everything I know about Buenos Aires and what we're talking about allows for Argentina to be in this position where for the last 100 years it hasn't been living up to its potential. And
Mhm.
now it feels like all of a sudden, because of the decline of the rest of the West,
Yeah.
and because what you just said is, it's like it was the reason why the Europe and the United States were pulling ahead, is that we had this great legal frameworks to do all these things, but it was under the impression that we had an enlightened government. that our Western governments were enlightened and they were doing all these great things and everything like that. And now that it's turned into a sort of legalized corruption up there because the state gets involved in all these different things. They get, like in California, it's impossible to do construction
Yeah.
because there's all these different, and they're all doing it because of licensing regulations. They all get kickbacks. Like it's all this crazy thing, and it just totally prevents us. I was just doing a bunch of research on the nuclear power stuff. The nuclear power, like in the United States, China has built a small modular reactor. They started in 2012 and they finished in 2023. And the United States can't get it out. They can't just like start the actual process because we've got so much crazy red tape. And Argentina exists in this realm where it's like it's uncertain. So you can do all these things, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see like the US development. They always tend to do development looking forward through private companies.
Yeah.
So they delegate, even with like USD Tether, like stable coins and whatever. It's like we give some sort of leeway to certain companies that we agree are not bad.
Mhm.
And that can be that whole other discussion. And then China tends to do things within the state, and they're like state control companies, even though sometimes they might say they're not, but
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
very like controlled by the government. Argentina is in a very weird situation at the moment with all of the change in government and everything that's happening, where I think it's a new form. And I don't remember what the economist is that says that there's like four economies in the world. There's like the US, there's like China, there's Japan, and there's Argentina. And they behave in a very weird, different way. So I know all the work that Damian Reidel is doing, for example, in order to push small nuclear reactors in Argentina. And Damien is the guy that connected to Matt Trevisano, that sadly passed away very recently, have been pushing for all of the stuff that is happening in AI and the server farm that OpenAI wants to set up in Argentina, sort of kick that into gear. I'm not entirely sure how that looks like compared to former ways of having this soft power like China and the US.
Well, I've been doing a bunch of research on China and the U.S. before the news, which happened only a couple days ago, and I've done my best to sort of figure out what's going on with Argentina. So let's start with the Stargate in the United States. So Stargate is the sort of, so Argentina is calling it Argentina Stargate. In the US, we have the US Stargate, and that's an agreement between SoftBank, Oracle, and OpenAI.
Yeah.
$500 billion in name, but the vast majority of that $500 billion is based on conditional agreements that so if OpenAI gets to certain agreements, the data centers actually get installed, then it's like a cloud compute deal. So like I think like 300 to 400 billion of that is all conditional over the past 10 years. And the huge amount of money is actually going into building these data centers. But the data centers take a really long time to actually get built and all these different things and a huge amount of investment. And the crazy thing I've been getting into now is that China has 80% of their data centers that is offline, that is underutilized. They're only using 20%. And now this is really common because they have basically overbuilt for the past 20 years because of their domestic situation, which is raise a whole bunch of money, get the state like you're talking about, get them involved, give a bunch of contracts out to these guys at the local level, and then overbuild so that everybody gets jobs, everybody makes money, all these different things. Same thing that goes on in the United States, except they don't have the democracy component where they're basically buying votes. They're just buying prosperity for their people, and they've overbuilt. So part of that's because they overbuilt, but the other part of it, which is really important, is that DeepSeek went through the architecture and made it way more efficient to do AI inference.
Yeah.
And so China's policy is to basically go in as soon as the frontier labs in the US do their thing, find out how they did it, and then make it really cheap for everyone to do it. So that could be why they essentially have such underutilization of their data centers. And like if that's true, if that trend keeps on going, then it's totally crazy what that means because all this data center might actually lead to nothing. It might be like the crash of 2001 in the dark fiber and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, many thoughts. Yeah. Um, I was watching this cool podcast with Anderson Horowitz, and I'm trying to set up my tone to like 1.5x because you're also like a quick talker, so I'm trying to do the same. But um, where you basically compare the idea of AI and everything that's coming as not necessarily the internet. It might be more related to the creation of the computer. So it's such a vertical thing. There's high
Mm,
intensity in the beginning,
mm,
uh, and given that paradigm, it makes a lot of sense for China to be doing open source models since they have the most amount of hardware production. And so if you can put the models into everything, so you
mm.
start with a massive model and then you go very thinly into, so if you have a temperature sensor in your house, you don't want it to have the entirety of Wikipedia. You just need it to be really good at very specific
Interesting.
intelligent things for your sensor. So for China, it makes a lot of sense to be doing open source. Yeah, the problem with the Sama thing, in a way, is like the scary thing, and I really support having massive infrastructure for server farms in Argentina. The potential problem is that one, Sam is doing a lot of like magical financing in order to
Yes.
do this, giving
Yep.
his previous infrastructure that they're an NGO, but they're also trying to get
Yep.
out of that with massive attacks from Elon because he hates him. Um, so then you have a situation where everyone is trying to play their hands and like getting 10% of MDA, like the service, and
Yeah.
doing the deals with Nvidia and
Yeah.
everything that is required. And you have the Stargate project where you're going to have a Stargate in Latin America that thankfully came to Argentina. Then you have the UK, you have the UAE. So I understand the deployment. Um, it could be it could get dangerous in many ways. One of the funny outcomes, I think, like I really hope it doesn't happen, is that the government changes into a Peronista government again, and then
Uh,
they try to nationalize the server farms, and then we have like a Evita AI, where
mm,
sort of try to take over. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think Milei is going to have a very good 2 terms. Um, and all of this is great for the local economy. I'd love to have serve farms in Argentina and Patagonia. But yeah, it's a very messy sort of
and
situation.
yeah, well, and because that brings into things with the United States too, is that while Argentina is getting more liberal, the
Yeah,
U.S. and Trump is becoming more Peronist
yeah,
in some ways.
full on,
The,
full
and
on peronista.
yeah, and it's really interesting because a lot of people compare Trump and Malay, but Trump and Malay, I think, are pretty different. I would call Trump a sort of like '90s progressive, a '90s Democrat, and Malay is not a '90s Democrat. He's from Rothbard, he's from Mises, he's from Hayek. Like he has like strong libertarian, like first libertarian government in the history, which is really interesting, but very different from Trump. And Trump and they're different countries too, but they're also in so many similar ways parallel universes to each other. And so the Trump is really interesting. He's done some particular things that are really related to our talk, which is Intel. So the U.S. government has bought 10% of Intel. And a lot of people are like, oh, look, that's a socialist thing. That's a thing that socialists do. But it's not actually nationalization. If it were nationalization, then the U.S. government would own more than 50%. But they've only taken a 10% equity stake, which I
Yeah,
don't think has ever happened. Like Norway, there's a precedent in Norway for that happening,
yeah,
but it's different. But at the same time, he's also doing tariffs, and which is like very Peronist. I would say that's a very Peronist thing to
yeah.
do, right? Is it? Is it?
No, I agree. I mean, so my read on the situation is that yeah, Trump is a completely different beast than Milei, 100%. Argentina has this, and I think it's not explored too much by journalists. That's sort of similar to what happened in Wyoming at some point, where a lot of
Yes.
libertarians decided we're going to go live in a certain place and change the thing. there's a lot of libertarians worldwide that really want to see the Millet experiment, quote unquote, succeed, right? So you not only have, and a lot of the decisions that he's been making to be like very cutthroat in the sense of I'm not bulging, I'm not changing. Like the cepo is this, and I'm not changing it. I think it gave validity to a lot of people worldwide saying, is this another Argentina thing that's going to fizzle out in a minute, or is this actually a thing?
Yeah.
And then
Can you talk
they,
more about what the cepo is? What is the cepo?
so the cepo is basically currency control, that the price that you're allowed to change your currency, and that messes up your entire pricing system for everything. Like everyone, like people complain. So now, um, so okay, just to bring it back a bit, I used to, when I started in crypto, um, the price for the dollar, let's say, was 300 pesos for a
Yeah.
dollar,
Yeah.
but the actual value on the street was like 1,000, right? So it wouldn't make sense. So a lot of the community that happened in crypto was mainly with developers that were working in Argentina for foreign companies, and they didn't want to get screwed by, if you have a $3,000 salary, in theory, if you go through the traditional channels, you're going to get 1x of
Mm.
what you actually deserve. So people did Bitcoin, and then they trade in the blue market. So like in 2013, I was working on a project, and I received an investment of, at the time, was 100 Bitcoin. So it was the end of before Mt. Gox. So that was like $100,000. And the way that I would change the Bitcoins into Argentinian pesos to pay my team was I would go into Second Life, which was this game. Yeah.
Oh
They
my
would
God.
have an ATM that you could change Bitcoins to Linden dollars, which was the,
Whoa.
from Linden dollars, I would change it to PokerStars credits because people in Argentina couldn't get access to PokerStars credits. And then there would be a loan shark in a local casino that would sell me pesos for the Linden dollars. And I think we're past I don't know, it's been 10 years. So I'm sure we're past the anyone is going to give me shit for this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would go to the door of the casino, and the guy would give me a bunch of pesos, and it was like Bitcoin to Linden dollars to blah blah blah, and the rates were like horrible. It was like 30% or whatever.
Yeah. Interesting. So,
Gotten
yeah.
a lot better since then.
So, but did Cuevas existed before then, right? And for the listeners, if you're listening, maybe coming down for DevConnect or whatever, a Cueva is basically a way that you can go exchange U.S. dollars for pesos. They're not as utilized anymore. I don't need to use them anymore because of Malay took over, and I was here during that entire time. So, where Malay was elected in 2023, I think,
Mhm.
and then since that point, he's essentially obviated the need for a Cueva, although they still exist and everything like that. But yeah, what is the Cueva? When did the Cuevas show up?
I think I mean, the Cuevas have been here for as many years as
Yeah,
the market hasn't functioned properly.
and
Uh,
that's 1980s, the 1990s. Yeah.
yeah, in many ways. I mean, we had like Menem, which was one of the presidents in the 90s that created the parity 1-to-1, the peso to dollar.
Oh,
And
okay.
they're the
Yeah.
ones that they got closest to um, like setting up the macro economy to do well, but they allowed the financial costs of the government to go up ridiculously. So
Interesting.
they wouldn't really pay for the government expenditure. So then that collapsed. And there's many ways that the Argentinian economy has collapsed over the years.
Mm.
But so at the moment, what the government has said is that we're going to let the dollar fluctuate between 1,000 to 1,400 pesos.
Mm.
So it's like within those bands,
Yeah.
and this changes a lot. So I'm sorry if anyone is listening and saying like it changed, but it hasn't changed. So we're going to allow for the trading to be within those bands. And if it goes up or if it goes down, we're going to either buy or sell dollars from the central bank.
Interesting.
But we're going to keep it in that range. And by keeping it in that range and sticking to it, you are giving a signal to the international community of investors of saying we're trying to do things well, right? And then what is happening right now, which I think is very interesting, is that this was set up like 2 years ago, as soon as the government got in place, and that they have the RIGI structure. So RIGI is like RIGI, which is a special tax bracket for large investments. And what they're saying is if you invest more than $200 million in Argentina, you get a special tax treatment. And so what we see now with OpenAI falls within the RIGI regulation. And it's like, okay, you want to invest a lot of money in Argentina, we're going to set up a special thing in order to give you advantages to attract. And I've seen, like, generally, I know for at least 25 different RIGIs that are in place at the moment, that they're just finalizing the specifics and the regulation and everything. But it's going to be like salmon production, mining,
Wow.
server farms, and everything.
Yeah.
But for those investments to come in, you sort of needed to prove that you're not going to lie to them at the moment where something goes bad, right? So
yeah, interesting.
like, okay,
Yeah.
dollar went up. If they would have caved in some way, it would have sent a bad signal to the rest of the world.
That's super interesting. How do you align incentives? And this is I'm trying to figure out Argentina. As you said, there's 4 economies in the world. I forget what they are now, but the United States, Japan, Argentina. Argentina is like the rest of the West, but it's different than the rest of the West as well, and it's really hard to figure out.
It's kind of interesting because every time Japan, like with Japan, we have this thing. Japan does well, we do bad. We do well, Japan does bad. If you look at the last 3 times that the US actually bought currency from a country, there was like Europe, Japan, then they sold Japan, and then they bought Argentina.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And so this RIGI investment structure is so Argentina has been teaching me a lot about economics, but not the way the theorists talk about economics. It's like, how does it really work?
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been learning about is hyperinflation. Yeah. So the peso was hyperinflating, and that means that the entire economy in Argentina was a threat because anybody producing anything was all of a sudden like at threat. Like you can't run a business under hyperinflation, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I went to so a lot of the movements in Argentina with crypto people.
Yeah.
So I'm 36, right? Yeah. A lot of the, let's say, OGs, quote unquote, that created Open Zeppelin, the Centraland, and the Graph, all of those companies, they're sort of my age. And my age is like in the 2001 collapse, where we had capital control. No one can get the money out of the bank, and it was sort of like Greece and what happened in Iceland. And
interesting.
We were, and I was like 13, so you suddenly saw your mom and dad just struggling, and you were old enough to realize that something bad was happening and what was happening, but you were young enough that you couldn't help. So I see this as sort of the vengeance for that thing that happened. And
hyperinflation as a fact, like running a factory in hyperinflation.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a new thought, but like, it's extremely difficult to manage your country in hyperinflation. Like at that time, my dad, for example, he rented an apartment, and hyperinflation made it so that a month after he rented the apartment, he was able to pay for the full contract for the same price of a pack of cigarettes. So he just paid 3 years in advance or something for the.
Oh, interesting.
So it's impossible to, and after I went to university, and I was in a university, and you had this you had this entrepreneurship classes that said that you have to do a business plan that is for 3 years.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't really know the country that we're in. This is silly. I'm not going to do a 3-year plan when Argentina works on 6 months maximum. So previsibility and being able to
Mm.
know that what you're doing is going to last for more than a year is super important at an emotional level as well, because
Well, and there's a really good point there, and it relates directly to the AI
yeah,
conversation, which is that Argentina is well prepared for the chaos coming from the other way, which is now we're in chaos, but in an abundance way. I think both of us recognize that AI is a fundamentally abundant technology that I now am able to develop applications. I built my full first mobile application yesterday. It works when I go around a town. It's like fully deployed. It's working, and I didn't code a line of that. That's a pretty abundant thing there. But it's also the same thing. Instead of the scarcity chaos, this chaos of scarcity and this the hyperinflation that essentially makes everybody's nervous system go crazy because you can't
yeah,
predict what's going on in 6 months to 12 years. Now it's the opposite, where it's like you can't predict what's going on in 6 to 12 months because it's going to be too much. There's going to be
yeah,
too like abundance of slop. The 80% of the stuff is slop, which is interesting in and of itself. But there's 20% that's like actual real utility. I got AI to edit a PDF for me.
yeah.
Yesterday I was banging my head against a wall about how
Yeah,
to
I
edit a
saw the tweets.
PDF.
Following the tweets of
Yeah.
you arguing with this PDF.
Yeah, well, it was just ridiculous. And I'm like, I was on this roll yesterday, and then I promised somebody that I would get them a PDF yesterday, and I couldn't actually get them the PDF because I had to go into this preview and try to figure out the software. And then this morning I woke up within 24 hours, Claude had announced where they offered this new technical stuff of actually editing PDFs. And
Yeah,
so my friend showed me how to just do it. And then I just send him it took me it was still frustrating this morning, but I figured out how to do it. Like that, all of that bullshit is going away. But only some people recognize it, right? Like most people are not going to go that step of trying to get the AI. What do you think about this, like Argentina abundance renaissance type of thing? Because people are more adaptable here, there could be strong middle
yeah.
class.
I'll try to summarize. So this is something that I've been. So as I helped create Crecimiento last year. I was a director for a while until November. From last November, I spent a lot of time trying to. So I went to Honduras. I went to Prospera. I went to um, like you have IPCT in Brazil, you have what's happening with Balaji in Singapore, you have a number of, and I would love to drop some links afterwards if it's
Sure.
possible.
Yep.
So this is Guy Thomas that he's built, he's written this seminal work on the fall of the nation state. Uh,
Wow. Okay.
and yeah, I saw his presentation in Honduras and it was like, it's a very weird disconnection between what I see happening in the real world and people not really feeling represented by former nation states and their narratives and ideologies, like the U.S. and China and the U.K. and Germany and South America, and so when I say that I'm going to try to be succinct, it's because there's a lot of things that are sort of meddling with that.
Yep.
So if I try to describe it, is that we are getting to a point where AI brings intelligence cost to zero in many aspects. It creates a slop that sort of you're going to be able to make any kind of app that you want for your family and your friends and your child's school and whatever. I see a resurgence on the idea of people want to connect more in the physical world and sort of it reminds me to there's an episode on Silicon Valley where they talk about manure in the UK. Yeah, so you used to have a lot of horses in the UK with the carriages and everything, and and people thought that if amount of people times the amount of car horses, it was gonna create this massive shit pile
Yeah.
on the streets, and then you had the car, and it just got rid of the manure problem. So in a way, I think there's too much information.
Yep.
There's too much information that's being condensed in a small screen. So my hope, at least my hope, is that AI is going to be able to help us understand the world and that vast amount of information in a way that is much more connected to who we are and what we want to be. Hopefully it doesn't get into silos that you end up with a version of Twitter that you're only follow people that has similar things that you want. But generally the number when you go from the small society or the small village to a larger community to now a community of 8 billion people, it's obviously not working and not allowing us to process the information correctly
Yeah,
for
interesting.
the amount of shit that we get. So I don't know, I'm really inspired, and I think the way forward somehow is to push for this community narratives that people feel that they belong, that they're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
within the nation. But so like Edge City,
yeah. And
and
Dev Connect.
different communities that
Yeah,
like are cross nation.
yeah. Yeah, this is a really interesting territory because we're getting into the nation state. The information problem you just mentioned is really good, which is essentially that me as a United States citizen and patriot have an identification with 300 million people. And the
Yeah.
amount of information those 300 million people create is insane. So that identification layer that like millennials, maybe Zoomers, Boomers definitely have it, is too intense. Like it's too much. There's too much info. Yeah, go for it.
So I would describe you, you particularly, as a frontier person.
Mm.
And this is why, like, in terms of you're in Buenos Aires, you're interviewing cool people and like having conversations and everything. I think that that's what created the US.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
in England
And
recently.
Argentina too, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's like I
Yeah.
was in England like recently with my mom and my brother, and I went to see Hamilton. And like I love this idea of the founding fathers of the US and like 20, 22, 18, just kids sort of creating the frontier of what was the US. And Anderson Horowitz also says in a podcast I was mentioning earlier, it's like, so if you think about what the frontier is now, like Argentina is one of them. Argentina
Yeah.
is one of the frontiers that you're like, I'm
It,
here. There's a lot of stuff happening. I don't know what's happening. I'm not going to be clear on what the rules are.
yeah.
There's a lot of gray
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah. Yeah.
but this is where stuff is happening, and this is where ideas are having sex, and
Yeah.
this is where I should be.
And
And
it, and it's not only the frontier of like a physical frontier as well. Argentina is very much the noosphere frontier as well.
yeah,
Like the and noosphere is this great term that so two people independently came to the realization of in the early 1900s, late 1800s, of just like the shared thought space. And the
yeah,
internet basically expanded that. And Argentina, very interestingly, has created a huge amount of soft power in the last 10 to 20 years. Like
yeah,
it's always been on the background of having this soft power, but particularly in the last 10 to 20 years, and particularly the last few years, Argentina has basically expanded its soft power quite strongly, I would say.
yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think, and I have this tattoo that I done that I've shown you for the. Oh, you're not gonna see it. The Faro Austral, sort of like a beacon of Western ideals happening in Argentina. I think Argentina is, and again, I don't want to be the guy that talks about Argentina because it's great. I have
Yeah.
a global view. Um, I think there's been a melting pot of Spaniards, Italians, Americans. Like there's been such a weird combination, and a lot of factors where Argentinian developers work very well with the US because also we have the same time zone. So, although you have incredible developers in India, if you have to work with people from India, you have a completely different time zone. So, there's a lot of factors that created the fact that Argentina is sort of like this melting pot of Western ideals that you see. I don't want to say collapse
Yeah.
because it sounds bad, but like Europe, the US, they all have different forms that there's some things are cracking, and if someone wants to find a place that is going to be like the plan B in a way, I either see Argentina or Singapore. But then
Oh,
that's
Singapore. Wait. I've never thought of Singapore as a plan B. Why Singapore?
well, economically, financially, crypto wise, you
Crypto.
have the
Yeah.
UAE, you
Yeah.
have Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or you have Singapore, or you have Argentina. But in terms of culture, we're much more closely related. So um, I I don't know. I see this is public, so I'm not like Martin Bersavsky, which is an Argentinian entrepreneur that lives in the US, billionaire. He did like 5 unicorns. They bought with a friend of mine like 30,000 hectares in Mendoza. And now you see that OpenAI wants to set up this massive infrastructure in Patagonia. And I can tell you a bit more of that happening, but I'm not allowed to. So it's if the government can keep the macro level and the economy
Mm.
stable, then I don't think we've ever seen something in the history of the world of what's going to happen in Argentina in the next 4 years.
And it's because Argentina transcends, it's because it's in that position of being like the Japan of the West, where it's like this thing that's like the West, but not the rest of the West. And there's it reminds me of Patagonia, the company Patagonia buying a bunch of land in Patagonia as well. And it's this, it's so interesting.
It's like because like a lot of people complain about so my ex-girlfriend of 10 years and we have a great relationship, Amanda. She's a master of wine. She's awesome. I managed to visit a lot of the places in Patagonia, both on the Chilean and Argentinian side, because they were doing wine and everything with her. Um, and one of the most amazing things is like the founder of Patagonia and the founder, everyone that people like really hates, they made their life effort to generally keep that place intact and support it.
Interesting.
Like, uh, just like generally a love for that region. Um, and and I think a lot of the hate is undeserved. I understand it. There's another really fun thing that happens when you go to the south of Argentina and Chile because the frontiers are not very well defined. So they're all friends. Like in the south, if you go to Ushuaia or like whatever, it's mix. It's like this land, this land, this land, this family, this family, this family. There's no an Argentinian Chilean border. It's just generally a mix of the whole thing.
So
Uh,
wait, when you're walking through the mountains, you can walk from one side to the other, Chile and Argentina, and it's just not defined, but it doesn't matter because what's
yeah.
going on there? Yeah.
Also, like the mountain range goes like so low that you're basically you not even sure you're crossing a mountain. You're just like this is like this is Chile, this is Argentina. So they're like the border with the U.S. and Canada. It's in many respects
Yeah, got it.
it's no the
So the last 10 minutes or so, let's talk about AI in space, because the space is so interesting.
yeah
So hopefully I can share one thing you taught me last time we talked is about data centers in space.
yeah
And that was interesting. I actually just recently learned that China is doing underwater data centers. Actually, we might have talked about that as well for the
mhm.
cooling aspect. What is it about space? Like, what can you share your vision of how space it plays a role in AI? Because I don't think many people are aware of that.
um yeah and again this is all like informal opinion that's not that much informed. Basically, I'm trying to get as much information as possible, but it's not that clear. Um, but I think uh, so. I think we used to be ruled by a civic stack in a way where you had at the top you have some sort of soft power,
Yep.
which means
Mm.
anything related to the UN, church. and different formats. So you have some sort of loose coordination of how everything is run. Then you have nation states, then you have provinces, then you have municipalities, and then you have like zoning laws that tells you you can build a factory here or not, right? So and then the way that we do work change, so therefore all of that infrastructure changes. So now what I'm seeing that is happening is that you have, so you're probably going to have like loose coordination mechanisms, either going to be through NGOs or NFTs, or I'm sure you're going to have some sort of like UN that is not 250 sovereign state members, that is going to be like 5,000. Because I don't see a reason why you wouldn't include like Facebook, Instagram, and City into conversation when you're talking about like large scale things. Then
Interesting.
probably you're gonna have the layer related to whoever can make changes into the physical world. So I don't want to say monopoly and balance because that is a very loaded word, and a lot of people may have perceptions on that. But it's like, okay, if you have a house and someone has to get you out of the house because the smart contract says, then you have to have an infrastructure in place. So the closest thing that I would say for that is Prospera. So Prospera, you have a special economic zone that has some ground rules, and the ground rule says that you can enter contracts using Spanish law, American law, UK law, whatever. They're going to abide by those contracts, and they have the potential for getting you out of a house if you don't abide by the contract. And then you have another layer, which is, I think what's happening is like a lot of this community network states, that the most related thing that I can think of is like the way that Chinatowns work, or the way. So Chinatowns are a good example because they sort of move into this particular area in a city, and it's like a community-based thing.
Yeah,
They have to
interesting.
abide by the underlying rules, but it is a very high trust society that is very connected to other high trust societies
Yeah,
around the
interesting.
globe and
Yeah,
around cities.
yeah.
So you end up having, let's say, Prospera, beautiful experiment. They're doing really well. And you can put something like, so Noma Collective is another cool project. Noma Collective. They're doing like this global nomadic project, and they're going to start doing the layer 2 on top of Prospera for like anything related to cultural, I don't know, like a lot of things related to the way of living. So it becomes like a stack that changes the way that we've been doing it before.
And where does space fit in?
So the space thing, sorry, I just went on.
No, I loved it.
It's
Yeah,
getting to it.
yeah.
But thank you. Space is it's twofolded. I think it opens a new jurisdiction in the sense that you don't have control to a particular land, so you're able to like play in a different frontier.
And that's where information comes in, because the information can be transmitted via space now.
Yeah.
SpaceX, yeah, go for it.
So like, for example, there's some like labs in the US that they can't really train their models using bioinformation because you have HIPAA regulation and everything.
Yeah.
But maybe they can train the models in the south of Argentina. In the south of Argentina, there's also like a weird law that allows you to train models without having to deal with copyright stuff. But if that information goes through physical cables in the physical world, then you might get into problem with different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
But what if that
Oh
information
man.
comes through a satellite connected to Starlink,
Yeah.
and you jump through that? But it's not really certain that you jump through that. So you might want to have some sort of like Cayman Islands for data in space. There's a satellite that allows you to do that. So you're extending the way that Argentina has a claim in Antarctica. You're extending your ideology to to space. And I think this is going to happen more and more. I think there's a lot of treaties by the UN that on one side, maybe they're not going to allow you to do that, and they're going to create problems. And then you're going to have other shows of force that's like, I have guns in a satellite and I can take down your satellite. So, but yeah, I think like there's been a change, and I've been hearing. I'm trying to trying to not break any NDAs. There's a change in the U.S. Foreign policy that is saying that they want to really support freedom of speech and jurisdictions that support freedom of speech. And the being able to transact information in space is the sort of ultimate representation of that. So I think we're going to see a big change on how now that the cost per satellite to be launched into space becomes cheaper, much more countries are going to be wanting to launch their own satellites, and you're going to see a play between jurisdictions being represented in space and not only on Earth.
So interesting. We got to do a whole other podcast on that later. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. And how can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Cryptogaucho on Twitter. And yeah, thank you very much. I think everyone should come to Dev Connect. It's going to be an amazing moment in time.
It's going to be so crazy. Thank you so much.
Bye.